We all have said that our mental health is one which we are not prepared to compromise on. However, we frequently find ourselves at a breaking point and losing ourselves in the midst of a mental mess. Let's tackle this concept of mental health and how it affects employees and businesses. To help us find seamless digital solutions to address mental health and achieving employee and organizational wellness, our guest today, Tafi Mazikana, a Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Vimbo Health. His journey in mental health began after seeking help for his own difficulties. Together with his co-founder and Chief Science Officer, Sherry Stein, he launched Vimbo Health with a vision to make mental health care normal and widely accessible in Africa. Tafi, thank you very much for joining me in today's episode.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your journey in mental health and how Vimbo Health was established.
My background is in finance, which begs the question, what am I doing in mental health? I used to think that my journey started in 2019 when I was lucky enough to reach out for help. But with time, I actually realized that it started long before that. And there's an interesting stat that it takes 10 years on average for a person to seek help from when mental health difficulties begin. And for me, I actually estimate that it might have been even 13 years. And through that time, it was just small things building up, going from high school to university, going from university to the work life, and the changes in expectations and what you consider to be achievements that come with that. And that general build up, of course, in the workplace, there are stresses and certain things that can just accumulate. I was very lucky though, that firstly I reached out for help, but at that time, I was living in the UK where the health service is quite well resourced and was able to throw a number of options at me to say, would you like to try this or would you like to try that? And I ended up going for a digital option, which opened my eyes and also provided a very stigma-free way for me to start to engage with this topic. And I was myself treated for severe anxiety and depression at that time. And that gave me a lot of knowledge of mental health, but also created a frustration that in Africa we don't have access to these resources that are made for us and tailored for us and our people, which is how Vimbo was born, together with, as you said, my Chief Science Officer and co-founder, Sherry Stein, who's also from Africa and has an interest in solving for us here.
Please share with us your views about the effects of mental health stigma and how it has potential to break people down and, generally how we relate to people.
I'm glad you asked that question, because stigma is one of the main things that we see as a challenge within mental health and what we try to solve within Vimbo. So the first real problem that stigma causes is avoidance. So in South Africa, we'll see that 92% of people who have a mental health condition are not currently in any form of care or help. Another thing that it causes is delay. So a lot of people who do get help, the 8% who get help much later in their journey when their difficulties are much more severe. And also, of course, there's unnecessary suffering throughout that time. So as I mentioned, it takes 10 years on average for a person to seek help from when mental health difficulties typically begin. And those are the main challenges caused by just stigma alone.
So looking at the employment setup, you have employees obviously interacting with their employers on a day-to-day basis. How does this breakdown of mental health, in the particular individuals, actually affect day-to-day functioning of the employees in the workplace?
So I think the first thing we're passionate about thinking about with companies is how are their managers turning up, because managers have a big effect on an employee's experience within a company. And if that manager has their own personal challenges, how are they showing up as leaders in the workplace? If that manager is not having any challenges, for example, they feel well, there's also the aspect of empathy. Are they able to empathize with those who are in difficulty, or do they see their difficulties as a performance issue? So that educational aspect of having gone through your own situation is something that's very powerful. In the workplace more broadly, the common effects that we see are absenteeism, which everyone is familiar with, turnover, people leaving because of difficulties, but also increasingly there's a focus on presenteeism, which is people turning up whilst they're facing a difficulty. In the UK, there was some research done on how big are each of these effects, And it was actually found that presenteeism accounts for 60% of the cost of mental health to employers in the UK, with turnover and absenteeism accounting for about 20% each. So there are huge costs to this. In South Africa as a whole, we estimate about over 200 billion rands a year is the cost to employees across all of these effects from mental health. So there's a huge burden currently being borne that can be solved through very cost-effective interventions like Vimbo and many others that are out there.
Tell us about Vimbo Health and how this digital solution in mental health works and how is it accessible?
So Vimbo is a self-guided app that aims to tackle the common symptoms of depression and anxiety. We provide through the platform a program that's suited to the symptoms and difficulties the individual is facing, and also has tools such as meditations that overlay on top of that to be a holistic intervention that the person can engage with in the comfort of their home, etc., over the course of, for example, 6 to 12 weeks. And why do we exist? Because mental health exists on a spectrum. When we think of physical health, we're familiar with the idea that not everybody with a headache needs morphine. But unfortunately, when we think of mental health, there aren't those easier to use, easier to access, cheaper interventions that are out there. So we are really the paracetamol for this type of situation where someone can engage much more easily, much more comfortably, and take that first step in a simple way. So from a point of view of what we offer employees is that opportunity for anonymity where employees can access this intervention quite easily and without any stigma attached to it.
Employee health and wellness is one of the most critical components in the human resource function, but it's highly, highly underrated in businesses. How do we see this app actually enhancing employee assistance programs that businesses are putting in place, for their staff members?
Yeah, I'm here to tell you that the ROI, the return on investment from early intervention, is huge. So there's a study done by Deloitte in 2020 which found that the return on investment from earlier action can be 500% versus when we wait for someone to seek that EAP counsel help, which typically has a return on investment of 100%. So whilst the EAP aspect is still very much needed, there is benefit in layering on this earlier intervention, this earlier help, which is shown to have a huge return on investment. So in financial terms, it just makes sense for business as well to start to take this action earlier and to be quite aggressive really in tackling the stigma aspect.
The return on investment sounds great, right? But how do businesses validate the fact that this application is working?
That's a great question. And we really do focus on showing the proof of this through data. And we share with the employer the engagement profile, the activity of employees, as well as at a population level, where were people in their journey of mental health when they started, as well as how have they transitioned since we came into the company and were available to employees. Right. So we're able to share this very openly, as well as create that understanding and insight of the population of employees that are currently there.
How practical would it be for business to implement this particular intervention in their employee assistance programs?
It would be very easy because we aim to be a stigma-free place of help. So employees will be able to anonymously sign up through a bespoke page that we make for each employer that's working with us and get help immediately on the same day from Vimbo. In terms of setup time, we're able to get an employer going even within a day where we're ready. We have various materials that they can share with their employees and their employees can start pretty much within the same 2 days or the same week getting help in this area of mental health.
Right, let's look at a different dimension now. How do we eliminate any discrimination that may come as a result of the usage of this app?
And that's specifically the goal, because we want to realign the thinking to be, what is the goal? The goal is to help people to get better so that people can be more productive. And giving that anonymity creates the ability for a person to take that first step without those fears that you talked about. And we should be able to see the residual effects from treating people and helping people at a population level come through in productivity. And it's very important that we allow the person to feel confident to reach out, to start and to use the platform freely,
right,
so that we get those benefits. And it's really just aligning on the goal, which is why sharing that information on this is where at a population level people started, this is where they are, allows us all to see the benefit of using the platform.
Earlier on, we spoke a little bit about turnovers and presenteeism and absenteeism. Can this application actually reduce the number of employee resignations that occur as a result of mental health issues?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we look at the effect of not helping a person, often if they have no assistance, they might start to confuse or misunderstand their mental health difficulties as being associated with that job. So I have difficulties with mental health becomes I'm in the wrong job, and the only solution for me is to leave this job,
right,
as opposed to solving the underlying root cause. So definitely when we look at what's happening with the Great Resignation now, where people are having the effects of anxiety that we've seen going up due to the situation with COVID, there is a huge opportunity here to start to tackle the underlying causes and have employees resolve those, as opposed to fearing that the only way they can find help is by leaving this job and detaching completely from that employer.
right. Well, that brings us to the end of our show for today. Thank you for joining us on today's episode in Conversations with a Professional. If you'd like to be in contact with Tafi regarding any mental health queries that you might have, please check out description with all his company information and contact number. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes in Conversations with a Professional.